Hello and very good morning, everyone. On behalf of AML UAE family, I, Jyoti Maheshwari, welcome you all. Here we are again with some more AML discussions. I'm sure you would have implemented your AML program. One of the crucial elements of AML program is KYC, Know Your Customer. Given the significance of this concept in identifying and mitigating the risk, here we are today to walk you through this process. We will also highlight some of the best practices which you can adopt to enhance the effectiveness of your efforts. To walk us through this KYC journey, we have an experienced AML professional with us today. I'm glad to present Dipali Vora, a qualified company secretary with 8 years of experience in AML and overall corporate governance. Her understanding of the subject and the unique style with which she offers practical insights in the most simplistic manner make her sessions informative. She has already shared her AML knowledge with hundreds of people with personalized AML training. One more thing, during the session, if you have any questions on the subject, feel free to post them in the chat box. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. Thank you once again and have a good learning. Over to you, Dipali.
Thank you for the introduction, Jyoti. So, as Jyoti mentioned, today we have gathered here to have more understanding about the KYC process. So, before we discuss the core topic, let's first understand that what is the basic regulatory framework in UAE. So, in UAE, there are two basic laws which governs AML CFT rules and regulations. That is Federal Decree Law number 20 of 2018 and Cabinet Decision number 10 of 2019, which broadly talks about to whom AML CFT law is applicable, what are the KYC requirements, and what are the other obligations the DNFBPs, financial institutions, and VASP have. In addition to that, we have Cabinet Resolution number 74 of 2020, which talks about targeted financial sanctions. Targeted financial sanctions is something which is applicable to all the companies, all individuals who are operating in UAE or who have some business in UAE. Apart from that, if your company is in ADGM or DIFC, you are subjected to the specific rule book which is issued by your supervisory authority. In addition to Federal Decree Law, Cabinet Decision, and Cabinet Resolution number 74. So the companies which are in specifically come under DIFC or ADGM, they are required to comply with all of the regulations. In addition to that, various guidance notes have been issued with respect to each of the sectors, like dealers in precious metals and stones, real estate brokers and auditors. Then we have one more such guideline which is issued for the benefit of lawyers and notary also, independent professionals which are working in UAE. So basically, this is the the primary rules and regulations which govern AML CFT law in UAE. Now coming to what are the obligations, overall obligations for the financial institutions, DNFBPs and VASP. For the one who are attending it for the first time, I'll just take 10 minutes to make you understand about what are the basic, I would say, the obligations that you have with respect to complying AML CFT law in UAE. First and foremost, all of the DNFBPs, financial institutions and VASP are required to get themselves registered on GoML platform. At the time of registration, you are also required to nominate a compliance officer or also MLRO, that is Money Laundering Reporting Officer. So point number 1 and 2 is achieved when you complete your GoML registration and you nominate a person who will be overseeing all of the AML CFT compliance in an organization. Point number 3 talks about AML enterprise-wide risk assessment. Now, enterprise-wide risk assessment, to explain you in brief, is basically where you are going to calculate the risk of your own organization. Now, when I talk about risk of our organization, it's all about the customers that we deal with. From where are they coming? What kind of transactions they are, conducting? How are they making the payment? It also depends upon what kind of services and products we are offering, how much risky they are, or how are we onboarding our customers. In addition to that, there are other risks also, like technological risk, proliferation risk, which is to be considered when we conduct our enterprise-wide risk assessment. So EWRA is completely based on the principle of risk-based approach. The risk-based approach means wherever there are more risks, you will add more controls. As per the law also, if we will look at politically exposed person, where there are, quite red flags associated with them, or persons who are coming from blacklisted country or grey listed country are subjected to higher controls. So here also we are actually implementing risk-based approach. Once we have completed point number 3, we will be in a position to draft our AML CFT policies and procedures because we have complete understanding about what are the risks our company is facing. So accordingly, we will draft our control measures also. Point number 3 and 4 is all about the documentation that we are required to have in place. From point number 5, it's all about implementing. How well are we implementing our AML CFT policies and procedures? So that will have KYC. KYC as in what all documents we are going to seek from them, what information we will seek from them. So this is the topic that we are going to discuss more. So I'll move on to point number 6, which is screening. Once we have got the KYC details, we would be in a position to screen them against UNSC Consolidated List and UAE Local Terrorist List. These two lists are mandatory in UAE. One cannot associate with a person or an organization whose name is in this two sanction list. So when you screen a person, there are three options: full match, partial match, or no match at all. So in case if it's a full match, we need to immediately apply freezing measures and file fund freeze report through our GoML portal where we have registered. In case, in the second option, if the name is partially matching, one will have to file partial name match report, where we are not very sure, but there's a strong feeling that this could be the same person whose name might be matching from this two sanction list. So when I say, implementing freezing measures or filing PNMR, it's only with respect to sanctions like UNSC Consolidated List and UAE Local Terrorist List. In case if you've got a match with respect to some other relevant sanction list, appropriate measures should be taken. Then the next option is no match. So when you screen a person and the profile is not matching with any of these sanction lists or UNSC or UAE Local Terrorist List, the next step would be risk profiling because screening results are clear. That means that person is not under any sanctions. It's now you are in a position to determine that how risky that person is with respect to maybe some adverse media or what is the profile of that person. Is that person a PEP, etc. On the basis of that, you will do risk profiling. In risk profiling stage, you will assess various aspects of the proposed customer and decide whether the risk is low risk, medium risk, or high risk. If the risk of that particular customer is low or medium, you can proceed with the business by doing basic KYC. In case if the customer is high risk, one is required to carry out some additional checks. That is basic KYC plus seeking source of fund, source of wealth, or making sure that the first payment is coming from their own account and senior management's approval before you onboard that person as a customer. So once you have completed your due diligence process, the next step would be you will provide the services for which you have onboarded that customer. In this entire process of seeking KYC documents, screening, providing services, and communicating with them, if at any point of time you have a strong and reasonable reason to believe that the person is acting in a suspicious manner or the transaction is suspicious, you may opt to file suspicious activity report or suspicious transaction report through your GoML portal. Now, once these services are provided, the next step would be you would bill them, and later on, if that customer is still continuing to get services or products from you, you also have to make sure that their documents which are with you, they are also updated. So there might be a situation where you will have to do re-KYC or at least do a KYC refresh. Apart from that, there are some other obligations also, like record keeping. So for the companies who are in mainland, the document record keeping requirement is for 5 years, and for specific supervisory authority, there is 6 years. Apart from that, there are some more obligations also, like getting your AML CFT independent audit done. Then you also have to report certain transactions. This is specifically for dealers in precious metals and stones and real estate agents and brokers. Then, in addition to that, you have semi-annual report submission, then updating your policies regularly, training the staff on a regular basis. And in case if you are going to ever associate or expect any remittance or make a payment to countries like North Korea, Iran, or Myanmar, there is a requirement of filing high-risk country activity report and high-risk country transaction report. This all reports that we discussed in this particular infographic, like FFR, PNMR, SAR, STR, then HRC, HRCA, REAR report, and DPMSR report. All of these formats are available in your GoAML portal. So today we all have gathered to understand what is exactly KYC, what documents, what information must be taken from our proposed customer. So let's first understand what is KYC. KYC is an abbreviated form of Know Your Customer. This is something which all of the DNFBPs, VASPs, and financial institutions are required to seek from their customers. First-time customers also, and the one who are regular customers, they also need to update their KYC documents. So today we are going to answer some 4 questions. That is, why are we required to do KYC? How will we do KYC? What are the documents and information that we will seek from them? And when will we do it? So coming to the first question, why are we required to do KYC? Whenever we seek their identification documents, we will understand that that person is actually existing or not. Once we get an ID proof, we'll be able to create a profile of that particular person. We would screen them. We would come to know whether that person is a politically exposed person or there is any adverse media. In the process of conducting KYC, there are some requirements as per the law that we screen them. We will do some adverse media verification. We might do social media verification. So all of these contents will help us to establish a profile of that person. Once we have established the profile of that particular person, we will then be in a position to identify how risky that person is, whether we should onboard, whether we should not onboard, or how we must classify them as low risk, medium risk, or high risk. Then, how will we identify? How will we, verify the documents which are submitted? So, whenever any proposed customer is approaching you, you must seek for ID documents. When you are seeking ID documents would include maybe a passport, driving license, or any other local ID proof. Like in UAE, we have Emirates ID. Once we have received that document, there are 2 ways in which you can verify the document: offline verification or online verification. Offline verification are the traditional methods. Like, for example, you have a boutique, or for example, you have a showroom of jewelry. So, a person is coming to you. You might actually verify the original one, which is presented right in front of you. So, that would be a traditional method of verifying the identification document. Apart from that, there are various softwares which are available where you enter the credentials of the ID document and you may get a report that whether that particular document is valid or it's invalid or it is a forged document. So there are various softwares which are available which could also be opted for. Once we have verified the identification documents, the next step would be, of course, screening them in the softwares which we are using, assessing the risk, classifying them into low risk, medium risk, or high risk, because we would have complete idea with respect to that person since we have created a profile of that person. Once risk assessment is done, we would continue working with them and monitoring their transaction as well as their documents. And last is record keeping. So the requirement, as I discussed, is for 5 years. So we have to make sure that we are maintaining the documents correctly, properly in whatever manner we are following, be it in hard copies or in soft copies. Now the question that we are going to answer is what documents or information we are going to seek from our customers. If our customer is a natural person, so we are required to seek identification documents as well as address verification. Identification, as I mentioned, it would be a passport copy, Emirates ID, driving license, or any other document which would have a photo and which will be issued by any government. So just as UAE has Emirates ID, every country would have some local ID which would be issued by their government. So even that would be admissible as an identification document. The next is address verification. For address verification, one would seek for utility bill. Utility bill includes electricity bill, water bill, phone bill, which will have the details of that particular person and their address. Now, if we are opting for utility bill or bank statement, in this case, we have to make sure that the document is not older than 3 months. When this utility bill and bank statement is not available, only then go for municipal tax record. This is a suggestion. that always go for utility bill or bank statement rather than going for municipal tax record or property purchase or rental. In case if you're going for those documents, make sure that the validity of that particular document is correct. For example, if I'm your customer and you are onboarding me, so this document which I submit as address verification should not be dating last year. Maybe if I submit a rent agreement, it should be current period. So that is something that could be accepted as a valid address verification proof. Now coming to the information. So once you have the identification proof and address proof, basic information like name, date of birth, birthplace, nationality, gender, the address, that all would be already available with you. But there are certain information which only the customer will be able to provide. That information includes, which is mandatory to see, is occupational details, name of the employer, and contact details. And fourth would be purpose of transaction. I mean, that is the reason why that person came to you. So that is also something that you would know about it. But this three information, which is mandatory as per the law, must be taken from the customer or the KYC forms which we are using. We should make sure that these contents are present on our KYC format that we are following. Now, this was all about the natural person. Coming to the customer, if that person is a legal entity. Now, a legal entity would have shareholders, ultimate beneficial owners, managers. So, in this case, the identification proof would be memorandum of association, articles of association. Now, just to give you a brief idea, why are we taking MOA and AOA? So, what is the logic behind that? When we ask for MOA and AOA copies, we will have complete information about the shareholders of that person because memorandum of association formats generally include the details of the person who has invested or who has done the capital contribution in the company. So MOA AOA is a must-have document. Coming to the next requirement is certificate of incorporation or trade license copy. In UAE, if you are dealing with local companies, most of them would have a trade license copy. But in case if you are dealing with a foreign company, there is a possibility that you might get certificate of incorporation, and trade license is something which is not a concept there. Certificate of incorporation proves that the company is in existence. In such cases, you can ask for certificate of good standing. Certificate of good standing signifies that that particular company is not dormant. Okay, that company is active, they are doing business, there are proper returns filed with the registrar. So certificate of good standing is a good to have document, not a mandatory. Mandatory documents include MOA, AOA, trade license or certificate of incorporation. Coming to address verification would be same as above that we discussed for natural person. Utility bill, municipal tax record, property purchase or rent agreement or bank statement would work. Now, since we have got the information of the ultimate beneficial owner from the MO and AOA, we are also required to do the KYC of the ultimate beneficial owners or directors or UBOs in case if there is any company which is a subsidiary of a holding company which would be situated in some other country. So in that case, the authorized representative in that company, that person's KYC should also be done. So whenever like the ultimate beneficial owner, we are required to seek ID and address verification, same as we are dealing with the natural person. So that information must be taken from the UBO. In the ensuing slides, we are going to discuss about how to identify a UBO. So that topic I'll leave it here because I'm going to continue in the next slide. The next question that we will answer is when will we do KYC? So as per the law, we are required to do KYC before we onboard the customer. But there would be certain circumstances which might occur prior to that. Now, these circumstances include if you are opening an account in the name of that person, you are accepting any kind of advance towards performance of some contract. You are accepting money in your account on behalf of the customer, or you are making a payment on behalf of your customer. So this kind of transactions, if they are happening, we must make sure that the KYC is done prior to that, even before signing the engagement letter. So these are the circumstances where you must make sure that the KYC is completed before all of these circumstances if they occur. Now we've already answered the questions like why, how, what, when. The next topic is what are the common deficiencies that we might miss out when we are conducting KYC. So this includes absence of defined KYC and CDD process. This means that we have not documented our KYC requirements in our policy. Because of that, every case would be different. We would not have a defined list of documents that we need to see. So it is important that what all documents we will seek from individual or corporate entity must be documented in our AML CFT policy. The next is inadequate customer due diligence or inadequate EDD measures. Inadequate customer due diligence means you might have missed out taking certain documents. Maybe ID document is with you, but you've not asked for, address verification. That is incomplete. Enhanced due diligence, as we discussed earlier, there are some additional requirements like we do KYC, basic KYC, but in addition to that, we are also required to seek source of fund, source of wealth. Then we have to seek senior management's approval before we onboard them, or we are also required to make sure that the first payment is coming from their account. Now, in majority of the EDD measures, many people miss out seeking and documenting the approval of the senior management. So that will lead to inadequate EDD measures. You've not complied completely, though you might have taken source of fund or source of wealth, but you've not taken senior management's approval. There is incomplete documentation or missing authorizations. This means that, I'll give you an example. When you have accepted a KYC form, so you just believe that, okay, KYC form has come, it's done. But we will not check whether the contents are completely filled out or not. Whether that KYC form is being signed, the senior management or the UBO, whether that authorization is done on the KYC form, or the second part, once we have received the KYC form, whether the compliance officer has verified that form or not. So that would come under incomplete documentation or missing authorizations. So now let's discuss some best practices that one can follow in order to conduct KYC. First is establish clear policies. Our AML CFT policies, which we are implementing in our organization, must clearly document in what cases what documents will be sought from natural person or from legal entity, from UBO, etc. That must be clearly documented. And the documentation which is done in the policy should also be as per the legal requirement in our region. Apart from that, one can also go for screening softwares, KYC requirements, because now a lot of softwares are available which can automate the KYC process. Identification documents could be verified also. So if possible, you all can opt for that, which will help you and be secured that the data which you've got is correct and you've verified. Apart from that, there's one more suggestion. Most of the people who are present in the seminar would also know that you might have faced one problem, that the customer is not very comfortable sharing their confidential details or confidential documents. In such cases, it is suggested to have a data privacy policy in place so that you can at least explain it to the customer that their data is secured with you. So one can implement the data privacy policy in your organization. Once you have this data privacy policy, having policies, procedures, screening, you must also make sure that the staff is trained. The staff should know that what documents are to be taken, what softwares are to be used, and how the data is to be preserved. It should not be kept anywhere in the server, like whatever systems which we are using. Since we have a data privacy policy, it is important that we are making sure that the documents are kept confidential. It's not just anywhere in the system, everybody has access of it. So that kind of attention should be given, and that kind of training should also be provided to the staff members. Then comes record keeping. Record keeping is just we are maintaining the data as per the law. Once all of these 6 points are covered, the next step would be KYC refresh. If you have that kind of business where the customers are going to stick to you for a longer period of time, you're also required to make sure that you are having proper systems in place to do KYC refresh. If I'm your customer, maybe I would have transacted with you last year. But today, when you were checking about my profile and I'm still your customer, my passport is expired. So it is your responsibility that you come back to me, send an email to me and tell me that please submit your latest passport. So that's a part of KYC refresh. Then is periodic health check. Now we are all aware that AML CFT independent audit is mandatory. In such cases, it is suggested that we have some internal policy to understand the gap between whatever policies are mentioning and how are we implementing it. This will help us to bridge the gap internally only, so that when we go for the AML CFT audit, at least majority of part is taken care by us only. So we have less observations maybe. So now I request all of you to just scan the QR code from your phone, and there's a small quiz on the topic that we have just discussed. This is the QR which you can scan from your phone, and you will get two questions which you can select whatever you feel is the correct answer, and we can discuss it. So the question is, in case of customer being a legal entity, which of the following information should be sought? So when it's a legal entity, we have to seek for certificate of incorporation. What is the nature of that business entity and the details about the ultimate beneficial owner. So the correct answer is all of the above, which 92% have given the correct answer. But I think the 6% have, I think, not seen the other options which are there. So the correct answer is all of the above. So there was one more question which we had asked. In case of customer being an individual, which of the following information should be sought? Identity proof, address proof, and occupation details. Here also the correct answer is all of the above, which is said correctly by, I guess, 90% of the persons who are attending the webinar. So it's identity proof, address proof, and occupational details. So the next topic that we are going to discuss is how do we identify the ultimate beneficial owners? So to identify ultimate beneficial owners, it is important that we have our memorandum of association and articles of association, which will help us to understand who is the UBO. There are around four methods in which we can identify who the UBO is. First is by way of ownership. By way of ownership means the person who is holding more than 25% of the shares in the company directly or indirectly. So the person who is holding more than 25% shares directly, indirectly can be construed as the UBO of the company. In case if you come across a company where shares are not there, maybe it's a partnership firm, that kind of company it is. In that case, you can identify the UBO by way of voting rights. Voting rights means the person who has the power to vote more than 25% in that particular legal arrangement. If by voting rights also you are unable to find out who the UBO is, because maybe the structuring is done in such a way that is not helping you to find out the UBO, then the third option is through the controlling rights. Controlling rights means the person who has the power to appoint or dismiss majority of the persons at the managerial level. So he is the person who is taking the decisions that who will stay at the managerial level or remove them or appoint them. So that is called as controlling power. If third measure is also by way of applying this measure, still you are unable to reach who the UBO is, in that case, you will consider the senior management as the UBO. Now, there's one thin line of difference between these two situations. First is where your customer is not cooperating with you to share the details of UBO. In that case, you cannot onboard them. But if when seeking the documents, you came to know that the structuring in such a way that there is no UBO by way of ownership, voting rights, or controlling rights, only then you consider senior management official. A customer which is incooperative means you cannot onboard them. If you are unable to know who the UBO is behind a legal entity, you cannot establish business relationship with them. Also, in case if any of the ultimate beneficial owner in an organization is a pet, Okay, so first we need to have risk-based approach in place. We have to identify what is the risk associated with that particular PEP. In case if that turns out to be high risk, in that case, you have to make sure that the entity to which he's belonging to is also treated as high risk. So that one person who is a PEP and is high risk is going to influence the risk of the entire company. As mentioned, you cannot onboard a person or for a company whose UBO, you're unknown about that person. You don't know who the UBO is. You cannot onboard them. So again, I need your phones. Please scan the QR and we have just two questions in order to understand your UBO understanding. Okay. So the correct answer is James. Honey is holding 10%, Honey is holding 23%, which is below the threshold of 25%. And all of the above is not possible because only James is the person who is holding more than 25%. That is why he would be considered as the UBO. And Honey, Neha, Abir, Jack, they will not be considered as the ultimate beneficiary. The next question, who would be considered the UBO in DEF Limited? Here, if we look at Fatima and George are the correct answer because it's Fatima and George who are holding 26 and 38, which is above the threshold limit of 25%. Here, Jean and Neha is not the shareholder, sorry, not the UBO, and not all of them are the UBO in this case. Now, the next topic is that with what are the circumstances in which you cannot establish business relationship or you cannot onboard a customer? If any proposed customer who is falling under UNSC consolidated list or UAE local terrorist list, which is mandatory in UAE, you cannot onboard them. For those customers where UBO is unknown or customer due diligence cannot be completed because the customer is not cooperative with you. So in such cases, you cannot onboard them. You cannot establish business relationship with them. Now, in case where the business relationship is developed by communicating maybe a account number or maybe just the abbreviation of the company name. So this is also risky. You should not get into that. Second is you cannot establish business association with shell banks. So that is forbidden. You must not associate with them. Now this is just a small topic. How do you identify a shell company? So shell companies are basically those companies which are only formed on papers. If you will look at the characteristics of these kind of companies, is they won't have a registered office address or they won't have transactions. They won't have any company. I mean, they won't have any employees in their company. UBO identification is little difficult. There is a possibility that you might find some association of such companies with tax haven countries or high risk countries. And many shell companies are also formed for some future transaction. So maybe a company is incorporated 10 years ago, but there are no transactions. So in such cases, it's advisable that have a risk-based approach and decide whether you want to work or whether you don't want to work. So when we are conducting KYC, there are certain red flags which you can look out for, which could mean that there would be something suspicious. Now, a few examples would be that when you are conducting KYC, the information which is submitted to you is not matching with something you found out from independent sources. The customer is associated with any tax haven country or high risk jurisdiction, or is PEP by nature, or they are belonging to any cash intensive business where there are no bank transfers, majority of business happens in cash only. You found certain adverse media with respect to any of your customers. If there is a situation where you are seeking for UBO information, maybe on email or the documentation, so the documentation keep on changing very frequently. UBOs also keep on changing. So this could mean that there is something fishy. So accordingly, having a risk-based approach and deciding whether to onboard, not onboard, that decision can be taken. But these are certain red flags which should not be ignored. Basically, I mean, think thoroughly and then decide whether you want to onboard or you don't want to onboard. So far, we've discussed about how will we do the initial KYC, how will we identify UBO with whom we cannot associate. Now, for those customers which are existing, our business, maybe we have some 30, 40 customers which we have regular association. So in that case, how will we perform KYC refresh? KYC remediation and AML compliance, how are they related? KYC remediation means that you are updating the KYC information with respect to your customers. Now, when you update or when you remediate your KYC of the customers, in this case, you are just getting yourself updated with respect to the risk of that customer. If there is anything which is missed out, maybe in 2, 3 months, if you missed out or adverse medias are there. So you're just making sure that the data that you have is in line with the current profile of that customer. So in such situations, it's important that you have proper KYC remediation also. So what are the situations in which we will have to, which where we have to make sure that the KYC is updated? We might, since we have AML CFT policy, we might have documented that, for example, for low risk customers, we might reassess the risk every 2 years. For medium risk, we might reassess every 1 year. Or for the one who are high risk, we might reassess every 6 months. So that is something maybe mentioned in the policy. So because we have to implement the policy, in such cases, you can follow the timeline and reassess the risk, or make sure that the documents which are there are updated. Now, this is something that we have mentioned in our policy, but there would be certain trigger points. For example, there is a change in the customer's details. Maybe the directors have changed, the UBOs have changed, the company has changed the name, or they have changed their office address, new branches have been opened, or new business has been added. So that would also trigger you to reassess the risk of your customers and maybe seek more documents, the kind of the transactions that they are into, or maybe there are some changes in the law which might, compel you to change the risk. Now, regulatory changes example would be if any country was not in blacklist or grey list earlier, but is now added to that. So why is Re-KYC important? It's important because one, it is as per the policy. Our policy would say that we are required to do the KYC of our customers on a regular basis. There are some regulatory amendments, because regulatory amendment means change in law, where maybe now new documentation requirement has come up. Any of our customers risk will be changed because earlier they were not into grey list or blacklist, but now they are. For example, you have a customer which is belonging to country A. Now that country A is added to the grey list. So the risk of those customers will change. Maybe right now it would be low risk or medium risk, but after such regulatory amendment, they might turn out to be high risk. Customer profile has changed. Now, maybe you have added some more services in your trade license and your KYC requirements are different now. The customers that you are dealing with, they have made some changes with respect to their business. So maybe now you have to be more cautious. Earlier, they were not into cash intensive, but now they are. Or maybe earlier they were not into defense, or maybe such high risk, I would say high risk sectors. So now you would have to be extra cautious when it comes to performing KYC. You might have to seek for some more documentation. So what are the steps of Re-KYC? So Re-KYC steps would include first, communicate with the client that you are in the process of conducting Re-KYC and you would need certain documents. Once you have communicated with the client that you need some additional documents, of course, you will send an email or you might give a call to them, the policy that you have in your organization. Then the information is to be collected. Once the information is received, you verify with what all requirements you had communicated to them, whether everything is perfect or is there any more documentations which are pending. If everything is okay, the next step would be screening or rescreening. If that's an existing client, maybe you're required to do rescreening of that client. And next would be risk reassessment. So since it's your existing customer and you are in the re-KYC process, you would have already done risk assessment earlier when you onboarded them. But later on, you will have to make sure that the risk assessment is in line with the current scenario of your client. So these are the steps that you need to follow while doing re-KYC. One very important thing that when we are doing reassessment of risk, make sure that the earlier file is also retrieved. I've seen many companies where they just change their existing risk assessment. So that means there's no documentation done for the earlier risk assessment now. So that would be a problem. So it's better that when you are doing reassessment, a separate file should be created and the earlier one should also be retrieved. So now we have best practices in Re-KYC that we can implement in our organization, making sure that Re-KYC requirements are also documented. So we have this ongoing monitoring, ongoing screening, ongoing Re-KYC that we need to do for all of our existing clients. So that should be clearly documented in our policy. Then we have implementing softwares. So as communicated, there are many softwares which are available, which will automate your KYC process, screening process, ongoing monitoring process. So if the softwares which are in line with your requirement could also be deployed in the organization, which will help to make sure that there's no room for any mistakes or missing out on certain compliance requirements. Then while drafting the policies or while doing re-KYC, proper risk-based approach should also be applied. Earlier, when I was your customer, maybe last year, I was a low risk individual for me. But today, when you screen me, you come to know that now I am associated with any pet. So there is a possibility that after reassessment, I might come under the high risk category. So this is the difference. That is why it is important to have risk-based approach. Whenever we are in the process of doing re-KYC, we must make sure that we are communicating with the client. Right? Because if we communicate if we communicate with them, we are transparent about it, and we have data privacy policy, which will help them to understand the requirement first, and their customer experience would also be nice. Now, when you have systems in place, you have policies in place, we have to make sure that the manpower which is deployed for re-KYC, that should also be adequately trained. Because re-KYC is not something that, it's the same process that you do it, one email, you send it to everybody. That's not the case. Every customer is different. The documentation of each of the client is also different. So the person who is handling this must know the difference and then communicate with the client. This will, lead to bad experience of the clients or customers also. So it's important that we have proper resources working on this process. And last is record keeping. Record keeping is very important. Everything that we do while complying with the AML CFT law, be it KYC, enterprise-wide risk assessment, drafting our policies, that all must be retained in the company for a period of 5 years. So again, there's a quiz. If you can just scan the QR and we will see. Okay, so the correct answer is all of the above. We are required to perform KYC and CDD for all of the customers, be it occasional, be it the new customers that we've just onboarded, or the ones who are already associated with us since quite a long period of time. The second question was, which of the following situations would trigger re-KYC of customers? So here we say that in all, the correct answer is all of the above. In case if there are any regulatory amendments, we still need to do KYC. If any of our customers, geographies have now changed and that country is now on the blacklist or gray list, still we need to do re-KYC. And in case if there are any changes in the customer details. So in all of the above situations, we are required to do re-KYC of our customers. So thank you so much for joining the webinar. We will be back with certain more interesting topics in future and will keep you updated. In case if there are any queries that you want to ask or have some confusion, you can reach out to the email ID which is flashing on the screen right now.